Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Seacoast Women's Giving Circle's 20th Annual Learn Forum. This year, we are focused on the topic of protecting marginalized and at-risk children and adolescents. My name is Daphne Schwab, and this is Joanne Knight, and together we have the honor of serving as the co-chairs of the Seacoast Women's Giving Circle in this, our anniversary year. We are thrilled to have such a huge crowd here tonight to learn about this incredibly important topic. Thank you for coming tonight.
So as we get started, I'd like to thank a few people that have made tonight possible. First, I want to thank all of you, right? I got to remember to talk with my hands, right? For choosing to spend your evening with us learning about protecting marginalized and at-risk children and adolescents. It's an important topic, and I'm glad you're all here. And thank you to our incredible speakers and panelists who we will learn from this evening. They will be formally introduced in a few minutes. But I want to thank you in advance for your knowledge and your expertise that you're going to share with us. Thank you to the Learn team, chaired by Jen Bell and Heidi Hansen, and I'm going to ask you all to stand, and their team, Susan, Meredith, Tracy, Margot, Lauren. All of you stand up. You might just want to make a note of who they are, because it's always good to chat with them afterwards, right, to see what their process was, because they have all worked tirelessly, learning about the topic by doing research and making connections in our community to make this evening a reality. We also want to thank our moderator, Barbara McLeod, for guiding the conversation this evening. And there's more. So thank you to the events committee, chaired by Erica Conklin. She's out and about here somewhere, organizing everything. Woo! Woo! Who makes sure that every single detail gets pulled together for tonight's event. And of course, thank you to our generous sponsors, including the Foundation for Seacoast Health, Piscataqua Savings Bank, and 3S Art Space for hosting us this evening. We would not be able to host or have events like this without the support of these sponsors. Please be sure to consider attending some of the amazing events here at 3S, including this weekend for the Form and Function Artisan Fair, which is a great event, so much fun. I always enjoy it. And a very special thank you to our founder, I don't know where she is, Ann Suddeth, is around here somewhere. Where is she? Can't see. Oh, she's over there in the back. Anne has been working with us this anniversary year on fundraising, strategy, and an impact study, part of which includes surveying our members, all of you here. So please look for an email tomorrow morning with a link to the survey. We really want to hear from you because your input is so important about the impact that we've made in the community and in your lives. So do look for that.
So we're thrilled to have all of you here this evening as we begin our 20th annual fundraising campaign to support our mission, which is to learn, give, and act together in our community. Tonight, we will learn about the challenges facing our young people and, most importantly, how we can all help. With government funding cuts everywhere we turn, we need to come together to stand beside these at-risk children and adolescents and give them support, resources, and ultimately hope for their future. Collective giving is a powerful philanthropic approach. Last year, we raised $125,000 with the help of many of you in this room. Over our 20-year history, we've given over $1.4 million in 71 grants to 52 local nonprofit organizations. We and the nonprofits in our community cannot thank you enough for your unwavering and generous support. To celebrate our 20th year and to meet this moment, this year the board has set an ambitious goal of raising $250,000, which is twice what we usually raise in a year. Because of the generosity of a group of our founders, our board, and some leaders, we are so excited to report that we are already more than halfway there. But this is where you all come in. We need you to help us get it over the finish line. To help accomplish this, we are thrilled to announce that we have secured $50,000 in matching funds. So, Any new or increased gifts up to $1,000 will be matched. So this is a great time to join us by giving any amount and become a member. So to donate tonight, please see our treasurer, Jane Lannon. Is Jane somewhere? She's standing in the doorway. And or you can donate by using the QR codes that are on the little stands and the tables.
Alrighty, again, we're happy that you're here tonight to learn from this incredible group of panelists. But for those of you in the room who may not know, we have a three-prong approach to our work. We learn, we give, and we act. Tonight, we will learn together. The Learn Committee will then craft a request for proposal statement, which will be sent to the community not-for-profits. This year, we're expecting a record number of grant applications in response to that. So then it's handed off to the Give Committee to do some hard work. They go through a very robust process, reviewing all of the applications, evaluate every aspect, and then it culminates in a short list, which they will present to the board for a vote on who we will fund. So the third prong of our work is ACT. Our members have the opportunity to participate in ACT or volunteer events where we use our time and expertise to give back meaningfully to our community. If you're signed up for our newsletters, you will find links and invitations to participate in hands-on volunteer opportunities with local nonprofits. For example, coming up next month, hot off the press here, we have a gift wrapping opportunity with the Portsmouth Housing Authority. And I have to say, it is an amazing event. It's really fun. So if you're not yet receiving our newsletter, feel free to connect with our membership chairs, Sue Spalding and Kirsten Mahoney, who are probably around here somewhere or out in the lobby, and get them on the sign-up sheet or get on the newsletter. Okay, in addition, though, to our typical volunteer events, this year we're introducing another way to connect, and I'm super excited about this. We're creating small group cohorts to continue learning beyond tonight, and at the same time spark connection and build community with other Giving Circle members. So please see the sign-up sheets in the back on that little table with the light on it, where you can sign up for the dates and the times and join a small group cohort.
Okay, enough from us. We have an incredible evening ahead, so without further ado, I'd like to turn things over to our moderator, Barbara McLeod, who has so graciously agreed to moderate our panel tonight. Here's a quick bit about Barb. Barbara McLeod is a longtime Seacoast resident who spent 25 years as an award-winning television anchor, reporter, and documentary producer in Boston. Following her broadcast career, Barbara co-founded Cross Current Communications, a boutique communications firm located in Portsmouth that specializes in working with a select group of mission-driven clients. She has raised 3 children, twins who are in college, and a son who is working in the solar industry in Portland. Thank you again, Barb.
Welcome, everyone. I remember when Anne was getting the Giving Circle started 20 years ago, and it's hard to believe that our kids are grown and that this organization has raised $1.4 million and donated to nonprofits to make the Seacoast a better place. And I congratulate all of you for your commitment. And this is like the best of community, what you guys are doing. And I'm just curious, can we just get some hands from people who actually haven't been associated with the Giving Circle that just came because it's an open forum? That's fantastic. Oh my goodness, that's so great, yeah. And I want to emphasize that the Giving Circle is open to all women and anyone who identifies as a woman. And you can give any amount, and then you're part of it. And you heard from the heads of the organization right now, like that there's a lot to it, and it's a great way to make friends and learn and impact your community. So welcome, everyone, and let's get right to it. So this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I think oftentimes we live in a bubble, sometimes here on the Seacoast, because it's such a generally progressive place, and there is more affluence here, but it doesn't mean that's the case for everybody, and so I think it's really important to help give us perspective of what's really happening in New Hampshire. So first of all, we have Dr. Christine Murphy, who's the Director of Development at New Hampshire Outright. Used to be Seacoast outright, and now it's a statewide organization that advocates and offers support for the LGBTQ community. Thank you. Janine Richards is the Director of Program Development at Seacoast Youth Services, which provides treatment for youth that need help. Gilles Bissonnette is the legal director of the New Hampshire ACLU, which is committed to protecting all of our rights that we have in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution for all of us, and you've been busy. And Lisa Wolford is the founder and executive director of the Children's Law Center, which I'm anxious to hear about exactly the kind of work that you're doing, but it is certainly kids who are in the legal system and how you help them with managing that and navigating that. So let's just go right down the line. The first question is, from your perspectives, what are you seeing for issues that are affecting at-risk and marginalized youth?
Sure.
Christine.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for being here. So I'm a retired academic, and this is a wonderful question, but it uses a lot of broad terms, and I can't help but nerd out and say, let's define our terms. So at the risk of boring everyone, what do we mean when we say marginalized or at risk? It's important to situate ourselves in the understanding that it is very rare for an individual or a community to be inherently at risk. Rather, individuals or communities become at risk due to the systems and situations around them. So specifically, we really look at mistreatment, which could be abuse or bullying, being underserved, a lack of resources, a lack of informed or appropriate resources, or being able to access them, and stigmatization, scapegoating, right, in society. Another way of looking at this is when you remove the abuse or harassment of an at-risk group, overwhelmingly the data shows that the risk of that group drops to average. So we're not looking at any particular group that is inherently, intrinsically at risk. Rather, we're looking at systems that create risk for specific groups. So I work for a queer youth organization, and we find that queer youth tend to find themselves very frequently in this category. They are not inherently at risk, but they are positioned due to situations, political movements, cultural expectations, and language and narrative that put them at risk. And when you target children, you are always targeting their families. You are targeting their caregivers, their parents, and frankly, you're targeting entire communities, because when you target children, you're targeting the future of a community. So this is a very broad question, and when you look at an intersectional lens, one of the things that you will see is there are overlapping patterns. So when you have queer identity, it's important to recognize that a child who may be either queer orientation, which is how you engage with the world, gay, straight, the umbrella of everybody in between, or queer gender identity, which is how you engage with yourself, male, female, and the umbrella in between, depending on other elements of their identity, might have them at a greater or lesser risk. So when we take the intersectional lens, the overlap of, for example, being a person of color, being a new family with English is not your first language, having a lack of economic resources, having a lack of access to medical care and medical resources. This can compound essentially the comorbidities of trauma and difficulty that would make an individual, queer or not, more at risk. And all of this is exacerbated by the fact when we're talking about youth, we're talking about individuals that exist within power structures where they have significantly less bodily autonomy and legal rights than adults. Children can be hospitalized against their will, sometimes for their own benefit, sometimes not, in a way that it's much more difficult to do that with adults, for example. So why do we at New Hampshire Outright work with queer youth, broadly understood? It's because queer youth tend to really fall within that three-part definition of marginalization. So mistreatment, lack of services, and stigmatization. The clearest examples of this stigmatization, I think we're all familiar with the anti-trans rhetoric that we've heard, this vilification of trans people as being very dangerous. Think of how damaging that would be for a young person who's just trying to go about their day. They wake up in the morning, they open their phone and someone they've never met, who's never met them, is either saying they shouldn't exist, their identity is a mental illness, or they're dangerous. You are inherently dangerous. You're going to grow up to be a danger. And think of the impact that would have on a young person's mental health. We talk about being underserved. A lot of us might know, I myself will say, it's hard to find a therapist. Finding a good one. It's really hard in New Hampshire. Imagine if you want to talk about something like queer identity or trans identity and you're trying to find a therapist who understands this. Imagine if you're the parent of a trans child trying to find support, a pediatrician who can speak with you in an educated way about the question of hormones, the pros and the cons, the risks or non-risk. It's very difficult to find those resources. So we find that our queer children don't have access to the resources they need in order to live the healthiest lives that they could. And then mistreatment. I will share some statistics later in the evening, but unfortunately, queer youth really fall at the nexus of sexual violence, of domestic violence, of verbal and physical abuse, and are at a very high risk of being unhoused, of being physically harmed, and of dropping out of the educational system. So, New Hampshire Outright, how we address it, I think like a lot of us up here, we look at it at a three-part system. One, immediate. What can we do to stem the hemorrhage of damage on an individual basis, working with kids, working with families? Two, the community, educational work, connecting with educators, with caregivers, with family members. And three, systems work. Our advocacy work at New Hampshire Outright has really expanded and continues to expand. So the approach is always bottom up as well as top down to both deal with the immediate crisis and hopefully lay the pathway for long-term safety for our children.
Wow. Thank you so much. That's a lot of information, and it's really timely, so we appreciate that. Christine?
Hi, I'm Janine Richards.
Oh, Janine,
That's
rather,
okay.
sorry.
They rhyme. It's okay. So I'm from Seacoast Youth Services, and we are a direct service agency for youth ages 0 to 18. So I remember when we had our kind of learn interview, and we were like, okay, what does at risk look like, our marginalized children, like what ages are we talking? And there wasn't really an answer, so we were like, we're going to talk about all of them because we serve 0 to 18. And not a lot of agencies can say we go from an infant all the way through planning for discharge at 18 and all of the time in between. Just Christine said, you can't talk about youth, especially young youth, without involving the family, which is so much of our work. At Seacoast Youth Services, we have programs that are family-centered. We are contracted with a division for children, youth, and families and juvenile justice. So we are a contracted provider that goes into the homes providing intensive clinical care if they've been abused or neglected. So when we have an open case, we work with our social workers to decide what the treatment will look like for the family and for the individual. And that can range from a few weeks, 3 months, to over a year. We often work with families that are in the foster care system. Many times when it reaches the level of involving Seacoast Youth Services, the children are no longer safe in their home, and we're looking for alternative placements for them to remain safe. So we're doing a lot of dual work, working with the individual, I guess, three layers of work, right? We have our individual clients, the children, but then we also have foster families and biological caregivers that we're still working with throughout the time in the agency. So I just wanted to paint a picture of kind of what we have. A number of programs, educational programs, family service programs, substance use programs, adolescent programs. So really we are very flexible in our programming because we are constantly scanning the community to figure out what the current need is. We don't take a child and plunk them in a program and make it work for them. We would rather know what the child needs and then develop the program around them. And we really pride ourselves on doing whatever it takes to help that family and help that youth, and really being flexible, breaking down all the barriers and taking away the red tape to really try and meet the needs of the families. I'm also detail-oriented, wanting to know exactly what we were supposed to be doing. So I did write down an actual answer to the question. But you needed to know what Seacoast Youth Services was first, right? Because we are providing direct care to children and families every day. So we're not necessarily on the policy advocacy side, but truly I get to see these children in our rooms, in our programs every day. So if we had to boil it down, which it's a really hard question because there are so many pressing issues and they're complex and they're compounded and you really can't take one issue away from another issue. It's so complex. But if we were, I didn't do this in isolation. We met with our admin team and luckily everyone gave me a completely different answer. So it was really easy to narrow it down. But the overall access to mental health care, trying to find a therapist in New Hampshire, also trying to find one that takes your insurance, if you have insurance, and is not 150 plus an hour out of pocket, that will actually meet your needs and be a supportive ear to handle some issues. And also, we work within the child protection system more than any other system. Certainly, we work with school districts, and that's a whole nother animal. But the child protection system of care it could use some tweaking. So we are working within a system that we don't necessarily agree with how it has to happen, but we're trying to do the best within the confines of what we have to offer our youth and still have the law and make sure that we're not being illegal. The way that Seacoast Youth Services does this is multi-prong approach, but we always use a wraparound approach. It is always about the family, regardless of the age of the youth, right? What does their support system look like? If it's not a biological caregiver, who is in that child's corner? If it's only us, and we will be there. We've had many foster youth that are in our adolescent program that don't know where they're going to go night to night. We had a young person bringing a suitcase every day, getting dropped off by a different person, getting picked up by a different person, did not know where they were going to sleep at night. And our clinicians were by their side every day, trying to take away some of that being so scared of not knowing what the plan is. And we are doubling down on the preventative work. We have developed elementary programs and family programs to really be impactful as early as possible. There are infants in our building all day, every day, and we are doing phenomenal evidence-based clinical work with caregivers and foster parents and infants, and it's remarkable. And then the last thing I want to say is that we invest in our staff. So back in 1999 or 2001, there are some discrepancies on paperwork, but a long time ago when Seacoast Youth Services started, it was our executive director, Vic, and a part-time bookkeeper. And now we have 23 staff members, 14 are licensed clinicians. We have, I see the yellow thing, thank you. I'm a soccer mom too. I was like, I cannot get red carded. That would be bad. So we invest heavily in our staff. 75% of all the revenue that comes through Seacoast Youth Services goes directly back to clinical services. So we are investing in trainings, we are investing in professional development, we are investing in good benefit packages. We have very little turnover, and we are really invested in providing high-level clinical care and being a dedicated partner in that work for those kids. Sorry, go ahead.
So I would imagine you have a pretty long waiting list. And how many kids or families would you say you serve each year?
We never have a waiting list because we always make it work.
Wow.
We average, I would say, and the back row back there can tell me if I'm wrong, but I would say 40 to 50 families at a time that we work with DCYF and juvenile justice. And then we can range anywhere from 5 to 25 adolescents at any given time through alternative to suspension programming and school-based referrals. So we have a constant influx of adolescents.
Thank you so much. Jill.
Thank you so much, Barb. Thank you, Janine. It was wonderful to learn more about your work. My name is Gilles Bissonnette. I'm the legal director at the ACLU of New Hampshire. What a wonderful opportunity and space. I just feel so fortunate to be here with such amazing speakers and such amazing folks in an amazing venue. So thank you so much for the invitation to be here. Again, I work at the ACLU of New Hampshire. I'm an attorney there. In our mission, it's really simple. It's to protect the civil rights and civil liberties of everyone in New Hampshire and in the country. And these days, that work is really focused on behalf of those folks who just don't have a voice, who are completely shut out from the system, are marginalized, and don't have power. And so every day when I'm thinking about how to bring cases, what type of litigation that we should file in state and federal court, that is really my guidepost every day. And those are the conversations that we have in our office about how to do the work and where to do the work. And increasingly today, that work is focused on kids. And it has become a huge portion of the work that we do in our office. And I want to just say at the outset, it's not just litigation that the ACLU is working on. We file lawsuits, to be sure, but we're also doing work in the State House. And we like to say when we're not successful at the State House and not successful in court, we mobilize people in the streets. And we organize and build power through people and build power through our communities, not too dissimilar from what you're all doing here in the Seacoast area. And that is really the model of how we try to do our work and make change throughout the state. When we're talking about kids and marginalized kids, I just want to own something that I feel strongly about and that our organization feels strongly about, which is that we are enacting policies right now that are marginalizing kids. Like, we are making conscious decisions, our elected officials, and it is having a tremendously negative effect on kids, including kids that are from historically marginalized communities and identities. And traditionally, when you're an ACLU lawyer, you think about the right to speech, the right to assemble, the right to press, and all the right to free press, et cetera, and vitally important rights enumerated in our Constitution. Increasingly in my work, I'm starting to think about the right to exist and just to be who you are, to be seen and heard, the right to be with your family and not be separated from your family. And so how this is informing our work is, I think, in many ways, in schools in particular. You can't live a fulfilling life if you're not educated in a way that recognizes your own lived experience, that recognizes your identity, that gives you the sense of welcoming and belonging that you are entitled to and that every student in New Hampshire and the United States is entitled to. If you're an immigrant, you're a child, you can't live a fulfilling life if you're separated from your parents. You also can't live a fulfilling life if you have a government saying that even though you were born in the United States, you're not a citizen anymore. If you're an LGBTQ kid trying to make your way through adolescence, which is hard enough, we all know, you can't live a fulfilling life if you have a government that is saying you can't get access to health care that's right for you, that a medical provider thinks is appropriate for you. All of these go to the core of a kid's ability to be who they are and to exist, whether it's in school, whether it's with their families, all of those really important spaces that are just so critically important for the development of our kids. I want to talk a little bit about schools because it's been a huge focus of our work, and there's been a huge Seacoast connection to this work. We have spent a lot of time in our office pushing back against efforts to make it more difficult for our educators to talk about race, gender identity, sexual orientation. And I just want to be very clear, we're not even just talking about it in the classroom, we're talking about like staff trainings, right? Where staff are being provided opportunities to learn more about the tools that exist to create inclusive environments for students, to create that very sense of belonging that I was talking to before. New Hampshire has said we don't want those things in the classroom. We don't want those staff trainings. And the way New Hampshire has gone about this process in 2 laws that we've challenged is they enact these vague restrictions with respect to talking about race, sexual orientation, gender identity, and they couple it with onerous penalties, whether it's loss of licensure if you're an educator, whether it's loss of funding if you're a public school. And it creates an environment where you don't even have to affirmatively ban books anymore. Educators will do it for you because the laws have created such a hostile environment that educators have to retreat. And they feel like they need to retreat because otherwise their license is at risk or their school funding is at risk, which are real penalties. super dangerous dynamic that leads to book bans, and it leads to books like this. A book for middle school students called Stamped, Racism, Anti-Racism in You. A book that one district bought 250 copies of after the George Floyd murder and said, we're going to have our 8th graders read this book and we're going to have a discussion about it. We're going to learn about this experience because everyone's following it, they're reading it in the news, and the district shelved it. That is dangerous. That's dangerous for our students, it's dangerous for our communities, and it hinders educators from their ability to do their job. And I want to now pivot to immigration because I just got the yellow card, and I don't want the red card. As well, I played soccer in college, and immigration is something that we care passionately about. As I said before, you can't live a fulfilling life if you're separated from your family. That's what immigration detention is. Like, we have to just own it and be real about what we're doing, okay? And so it's important that we protect due process rights. It's important, too, that we protect the rights of babies born in this country who are constitutionally entitled to birthright citizenship. We filed that lawsuit in New Hampshire, and it'll probably be at the Supreme Court this spring. And so I'll just stop with that, but I just wanted to just express my gratitude for this space and just to hear all the amazing work that everyone's doing, and just really thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Gilles. Lisa Walford, founder and executive director of the Children's Law Center.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here tonight. I founded the Children's Law Center of New Hampshire in 2022 after working at the Attorney General's office and leading the investigation into child abuse-related crime at the Youth Detention Facility in Manchester, an experience that my primary takeaway from was that our government had created a system that was dedicated to the degradation of children's humanity and the profligate waste of state resources to prosecute, defend, incarcerate children, and then, because most of these kids exited out of the system at 18 into the adult criminal legal system, we pay to prosecute, defend, and incarcerate them as adults. So the Children's Law Center of New Hampshire, our mission is to improve outcomes for at-risk children. We do that through interdisciplinary, wraparound legal representation and social services advocacy, primarily for kids who are child welfare system involved. We also are policy advocates. We advocate for system reform at the state legislature, and we provide training and education for child welfare professionals and other lawyers who work with kids in the system. The most pressing issues facing marginalized children from our perspective, the most pressing issue is that we have an incredibly dysfunctional child welfare system. It punishes at-risk children. It traps them in intergenerational cycles of poverty and trauma. When I pick up the Union Leader, I don't pick it up, I read it online, but when I read a story about a young adult who's being sentenced to prison because they've hurt a child, I can all but guarantee that young adult just aged out of New Hampshire's child welfare system a handful of years ago. Our child welfare system forces children into complex legal proceedings that produce terrible outcomes for them. These proceedings ignore childhood trauma. Children who are victims of abuse and neglect, by definition, have suffered complex trauma. Children in other types of child welfare proceedings, the vast majority of these kids also have suffered childhood trauma. Child welfare proceedings blame children for the emotional and behavioral dysregulation that they demonstrate, which is also a function of complex trauma. These kids are reacting and lack the executive functioning skills because of the trauma they've experienced, but these are symptoms of circumstances that they had no hand in creating, and yet they are punished by the system for this behavior. The system ignores the financial precarity and poverty that funnels children and families into the child welfare system. And you should know, if you don't already, the child welfare system is a system of poverty. Our child welfare courts are poverty courts. These proceedings ignore special education needs that these kids have. Almost all children in the child welfare system have special education needs, but the system ignores those needs and the damage that court involvement, poverty, and family dysfunction cause to children's educational progress. One of the most harmful actions that the child welfare system takes is to remove children from their families and send them to live in institutions, some as far away as Missouri, Arkansas, and Mississippi. New Hampshire has one of the worst records in the entire country for separating kids from their families and sending them to live in these facilities. Almost 30% of our foster children in New Hampshire are living in facilities right now. Living in institutions separated from family and friends and school and pets and siblings and pediatricians and dentists and community and everything these kids know is exceptionally traumatizing for children who are already traumatized. And it is therefore not a huge surprise that outcomes for kids who live in institutions are awful. In short, the child welfare system harms kids. If New Hampshire valued the children that are in these systems, we would acknowledge the harm that the system caused, right? The system is over 150 years old. It has never served children well, but government won't admit it, and the state doesn't value kids enough to come clean about it. Keep in mind that the American legal system was designed to resolve legal disputes, not to solve social welfare problems, not to take care of children, and our system does those things really poorly. I've got 1 minute left. I'll talk more in a bit, I think, about the work that we do, but primarily we do the work through wraparound interdisciplinary legal representation and social services advocacy. You'd be amazed at how many legal challenges these children have. You don't think of kids as having legal challenges, but they have a universe of legal challenges, and we become experts at special education law, abuse and neglect law, delinquency law, guardianship law, and if a kid that we represent has a challenge in any of those categories and more, we'll represent them across the board. This means educating and making arguments in court every single day, educating child welfare professionals about adverse childhood experiences. You'd be amazed at how little the system knows about ACEs, educating them about protective factors that help mitigate those ACEs, and making arguments that institutional placement is inherently harmful to children. And we argue that the system has to respect children's educational rights as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa, that is sobering. Like, it's heavy, right? But it's important for us all to learn and hear about it. I do want to make mention that each of you had a card and hopefully a pencil on your seat, and we would love to get your questions that we will have time as we continue to talk about some of the questions from the audience. Christine, let's go to you. Can you give us some specific examples? Like, help us paint the picture. We don't have marginalized or at-risk youth up here, and so we're not hearing their stories, but it would be wonderful to get a sense of some of the stories that you've heard and the kids that we're talking about and their challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. When we talk about disproportionate risk, when we're looking with queer youth, we really cut close to the bone when we talk about suicide. When we're talking about suffering, suicide, and this is a very triggering subject, I understand, is really the starkest barometer of evaluating the suffering of a community or an individual, attempted and completed suicide. So a couple of statistics that people often aren't aware of. nationally across the US for queer youth ages 13 to 17 and specific to New Hampshire. From a 20,000 person survey conducted in 2024, we saw that 12% of queer youth attempted suicide in the last 12 months. Reminder, that was 2024. That was before the year of our Lord Beyonce, 2025, that we're currently living in, okay? And the administration that came with it. In New Hampshire, for young people identifying as gay or lesbian, 17% of them attempted suicide in the last 12 months. For children who identify as trans, 27% of them attempted suicide. That's more than 1 in 4, okay? Comparatively, straight and cisgendered children, the attempted suicide rate is about 5%. So if you are a young gay kid, you're 3 times likely in the state of New Hampshire to try to end your own life. If you are a young trans kid, you are 5 times as likely in the state of New Hampshire to try and end your own life. And when we look at very sobering numbers like this, the question is why? 50% of queer youth report being bullied at home, in school, in their religious institutions, or just out in public. In New Hampshire, the numbers are actually higher than that. It's about 55% report physical assault on school premises, often with little to no teacher intervention. So the risk of physical violence to young queer people is very high. Compared to straight and cis children, bullying falls at about 10%. So 1 in 2, half of the queer kids you meet have been beaten up because of their sexual identity or gender orientation, as opposed to 1 in 10 kids being beaten up for other reasons. Another statistic, and this is very triggering, 1 in 4 queer children, 17 and younger, have reported sexual assault. For non-queer children, the rate is about 1 in 10. Both numbers are horrifying, but the numbers are so much higher for young queer kids. And one of the things, some other statistics, 50% of families with queer children in the last year have reported researching into moving out of the state of New Hampshire to protect their children by going to other states with different policies. At New Hampshire outright, we have 3 families that we know of who have emigrated to California specifically. Staying in contact with these families, what we hear, it's exactly what I said at the beginning of the evening. When you remove the sources of violence that harm the child, the children are no longer at risk. They're happy, they're thriving, they're playing sports. And what really chokes me up is one of the kids said to our executive director, "I didn't know life could be this way." And we're laughing. I lived in California, and I was like, yeah, the avocados grow on trees, and it's sunny every day. It's amazing, right? And she said, no, I didn't know I could wear what I wanted, and no one would spit on me. I think she was about 14. So information, when we're looking at specific details of lived experience, New Hampshire Outright has a podcast out, which is really lovely, and I recommend you all listen to it. And one of the stories that comes up a lot is just how much happier children are when they have access to supportive individuals and services. Oh, I just got yellow carded too. I don't play sports, so this is very exciting for me. The risk of suicide for a young person, a queer young person, is halved if they have just one supportive space or adult in their lives. So one of the things at New Hampshire Outright that we try to do is provide a peer-to-peer support group where kids can be safe, even if they are in the foster care system. We have a lot of children who are unhoused. We have a lot of children who don't know where they will be sleeping at night, but we can provide a space where their identity is not questioned, they are supported, and they are safe. And just one adult, and the other, leaning into that statistic, we provide educational resources so we can all be that adult for young kids. I'm not a parent. Many of you, maybe you are, but your kids are straight as arrows. That's great. You may be community members. So we're really looking to, frankly, cut the risk and keep our kids alive.
Yes, and I can attest to the support services that you offer parents, that how critical that is for them to be able to share their fears and get educated, and your organization does that so well. Gilles, this bleeds into the kind of work that you're doing at New Hampshire ACLU.
Absolutely. In one of the cases that I mentioned, most recent challenge to New Hampshire's 2025 Anti-Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Law. I just want to give a huge shout out to New Hampshire outright because they've really been leading the way in this space. They were a plaintiff as well in the lawsuit challenging this law that prevented schools from providing inclusive environments for students. Part of what it means, too, to provide an inclusive environment for students is to bring in outside groups that can help, that are experts in this space, that can help educate staff about how to create a welcoming environment for everyone, including our LGBTQ students. I just wanted to highlight that. It's been a real pleasure working with you all on that case. I mentioned a Seacoast connection to that case and then forgot to explain what I was talking about. In that case as well, involved are the school districts of Dover, Oyster River, and Somersworth. You all are in a community that is fighting back, and I think that's something that we all really can be proud of, and I know it's something that I'm proud of. I want to just be very clear that all of this work is nonpartisan work. When I talk about the work that the ACLU does, listen, if you're with us, I'm with you. It's really that simple. Doesn't matter what political party you are. If you're going to help me protect immigrant communities, I'm with you. You're going to help me protect the rights of LGBTQ plus students, I'm with you. This is issues-based work where all of us here are really trying to protect people that don't have a voice. And that is how I think of the work that we're doing here at the ACLU. And in New Hampshire, honestly, we've been in the front lines nationally on so many of these issues, probably unfortunately. I'll tell you, just in the education space, New Hampshire in 2021 was among the first states in the country to pass a classroom censorship law. New Hampshire. In the past 9 months, New Hampshire has been on the front lines of litigation nationally trying to protect the rights of immigrants, trying to protect the rights of students amidst these efforts to make it more challenging for our immigrant friends to live and for trans students just to exist in public and in schools. In the education space, because I love props, because I'm a lawyer and I don't know, I just like waving them around, but I like to tell this story that in 2013, one of my first events at the ACLU when I joined was a book ban event at a bookstore in Exeter. What's the name of the bookstore in Exeter? I just went, that place is amazing, by the way. Oh my God. Because I forgot my props, and so I bought my props on the way over here, actually. And there was a book ban event, and I thought, this is great, but this is like kind of hokey, right? This is not really a thing that I'm dealing with. Oh my Lord, have things changed. And books are important. Not only are there symbols, they're tangible things that we can reference and read. And books can be life-changing. We've all read that book, right, once when we were a kid. We all have this book that we remember we were a kid. We're like, oh my God. Changed your whole perspective. Imagine being a trans student and reading genderqueer for the first time and realizing I am not alone. There are people like me. There's a whole support network out there for me. There's a page in this book that I just have to read. It's very short, but it's where the protagonist says, but why am I like this? Sometimes I feel like my sexuality is broken and my gender is broken. You have someone here who is struggling, and the whole book is about reopening that student's perspective, that there are other people like you, there are adults who know what you're going through, can provide support. These types of books, which can be life-changing, are under attack. People don't want them in our school libraries. Oftentimes they don't want them in our public libraries. This is why books matter, and this is a core fight to protect our students, to have access to this book, to any book that they want, that acknowledges who they are, that acknowledges their humanity, that acknowledges their lived experience. I have been corrected. In 2013, I thought, man, this is maybe not as much of an ACLU issue. This is front and center because it's necessary to protect our kids. They need to have access to information.
Gilles, I have a trans daughter, and when she was at school and trying to figure out what bathroom to use, and I was like, we don't want to make other people feel uncomfortable. And it was an educator that came into the school and did a presentation, and I was talking to him, and he made it very clear to me that one person's discomfort does not trump another person's civil rights. And that was like, ding! ding, ding, ding. I'm like, oh, yeah,
Absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely.
And so I just feel that sometimes gets lost because we all think about our own kids. I don't want that person who happens to be a trans person who might have a penis in the bathroom with my daughter. Like that, I don't want that. But it's your kid who's trans and they need to go to the bathroom and they can't use the bathroom and they wet their pants and they come home because they can't do after school activities because they've been holding it all day. Then you realize it means they can't participate in civil life. It means they can't participate in school. It means their health. So I feel like I just wanted to make that point, and I thank you for the work you're doing. Janine, I would love to hear from you about what are we missing? What are we not seeing just because of the community we live in and because a lot of this is just not obvious to us?
Yep. I think that we are all very fortunate to live and work in the Seacoast for many reasons. It's beautiful, it's affluent, it's supportive, it's a great place of opportunity. But there are a lot of struggling families and a lot of struggling youth. Before I came to Seacoast Youth Services, I worked as a school social worker, school counselor, and a director of wellness for a lot of years. And I bring like the school perspective and school flavor to a nonprofit that is working primarily within the child welfare system. So I joke that when we go and present at DCYF or juvenile justice, like I used to be on the other phone screaming at DCYF because as a school social worker, you were not doing enough to protect the students that were in my office. And I was working way harder than you were, Child Protection Services, and this is your job. So I've had to repair some of those relationships as we're trying to get referrals from them. But I do, just as I said before, like we're working within a broken system of child welfare, trying to provide services for the kids. And I truly believe that CPSWs and juvenile justice probation officers that we work with are truly trying to do the same thing, right? They're constrained by the laws, by the functioning, by their own barriers to try and do all of this good work. I feel like we need to partner better with the child serving agencies in our communities. Students, children spend the majority of their time at school, if they go to school. Not all of them do. So I think partnering with school districts, partnering with helpers in school counselors, school social workers, teachers, principals, directors of special education has been incredibly fruitful for our agency because there are so many students that are underserved that we have no idea. If they don't reach the level of child protection, or if they have not done a delinquent act that has put them with a JPPO, if they are really just skating by, going to just enough school that no one's really noticing, but they only go to school to eat, or they only go to school to socialize, or they only go to school to get clothes from their social worker. Those are the youth that I really want us to focus on, and especially under the age of 10, because they have less voice, less power, less control over their lives, and like Lisa said, like this is a circumstance that they did not create themselves. They were born into this, or their family structure has always generationally existed like this. They don't know any different. Empowering organizations like Seacoast Youth Services and all of you to figure out what your local school district needs, or what your local mental health agency needs, or what nonprofits like SYS need. There are so many students that are homeless, so many in foster care, so many that are hungry, and we have absolutely no idea. We used to joke with my old superintendent, as long as they had ponytails and Izod shirts, no one cared. But that was just the tip of the iceberg, right? Until we dig down and find out what's going on with each of these youth, there's an enormous problem in our community that we have the power to impact, and we are choosing to turn a blind eye to that, I think sometimes. It's really easy to say that we are an affluent community, we take care of each other. This is like the Hardy, New Hampshire way of we help thy neighbor. But does it really look like that? Are we really seeing all of the families? And I would urge, let's not get it to the point where they're involved in having a CPSW and DCYF involved, and getting to the point where they're 13 through 17 and having no support systems. Find out who those kids are early and try to intervene as soon as we can.
Thank you. So Lisa, you discussed earlier about just the dangers of group homes and institutionalization, and I think just give us a sense of how and what needs to change. Like you referenced it, but what needs to happen?
New Hampshire needs to stop sending children to institutional placement.
Does every state do that?
Yeah, every state does
Okay.
it. New Hampshire just does it at higher rates.
Because it's cheaper?
Oh, God, no. It is obscenely expensive. It's the most perverse system. It costs up to $1,100 a day for a student, depending on the level of care. They rank these institutions by level, but it can cost upwards of $300,000 to send a child for a year. Children are not supposed to live in these facilities. There's a fictional narrative that has developed around them, around these institutions, that they provide holistic therapeutic interventions 24/7, and it is simply not the case. The outcome data is horrific. Kids stop being educated by and large, so older teenagers will not achieve high school diplomas or GEDs. They do not obtain adult living skills. They'll never take driver education, for example, in preparation for getting a license. Transportation is a big thing in the state of New Hampshire, so that's one big strike against them. They're isolated from friends and family. They're subjected frequently to physical and chemical restraint. The fix is to reform the laws such that the obscene amount of money that is spent on these institutions is channeled to the system of care. The system of care is a framework that the law provides. It's written into the law that is intended to provide at-risk, underserved children and families access in their communities to mental health treatment, to social services, to poverty mitigation strategies, so that families don't wind up in court. What has to happen is that the reach of the child welfare system, the court system, has to shrink. And so you do that by changing the law. It is one of the things that we advocate for vociferously over and over again. We have to reduce the types and numbers of children and families that are pulled into these courts that do not serve their interest and produce really awful outcomes for them.
So do we have enough group homes? Or institutionalization is different than like the Chase House, right? The Chase home.
I use the word institutionalization. It's because that's what they are, and I include Chase Home in that definition. In the law, group homes are defined, I think, as having 16 or less beds, institutions as 16 or more beds. The result is the same. You cannot isolate children away from their families, communities, public schools, everything they know, and put them in context with other children. That's their only peer group, right? As other kids who have suffered complex trauma just like they have. You cannot do this and expect it to work. So it doesn't work at Chase Home. It doesn't work at the Nashua Children's Home. It doesn't work at the Dover Children's Home. It doesn't work at Mount Prospect Academy. It doesn't work at Bledsoe Academy in Tennessee, where New Hampshire in 2023 had to yank 2 boys who were there and were being abused. These kids are also at higher risk of physical and sexual abuse. It is not what families and children need. They need to be supported in their communities.
We're going to just take a moment and try to collect some of the cards. Oh, awesome. You're ahead of me. Before we get to these, let's just talk a little bit about what would be the best use of funding in your view, Christine?
Yes, I was very excited about this question as the Director of Development, but I think I have a somewhat unconventional answer. I really reject competitive philanthropy. I think, yeah, and we all should, quite frankly. I'm very good at my job. Don't you want to give me money now? I'm kidding. Truly, investing in the community, as Lisa said, is the best way to support children. For example, Gather, an amazing food service organization. That is not specifically focused on childcare work. If you feel very passionately about food resource, donating to Gather will help families and children. Some of those children and families will be queer and will come back and report to us at New Hampshire outright that they have more food because of that. If you support the ACLU and support to protect our civil liberties, that will help support all the children represented by everyone on this stage. So I think the question of where you allocate your funding is a tricky one. It's very personal. I think everyone up here is a major player doing fantastic work. Sadly, I can't give you an answer for where to donate, but I really think it's important that we understand the overlap of all of these issues and the fact that no one organization is going to fix what is a very systemic and systems-wide and community-based problem.
Janine, you want to tackle that question?
I had a whole list of what I'd do with the money. Am I a bad person? I feel like I'm sitting in a little bit different of a spot, is that we are a direct service organization. So when we are looking at all types of funding, it's exactly how do we affect change for the child in our program. Whether it's just one child, whether it's infusing money into a new program, whether it's giving a boost to a program that could use a little increased capacity, it's creating summer programs, it's creating clothing closets, it's a lot of different opportunities. So obviously, the more funding, the more opportunity, the more impact. But I want to, every dollar that comes into Seacoast Youth Services directly gets generated back to the youth. So regardless of how much money that is, we will make a dollar go 5. I think that the important piece is exactly what Christine said, is if our program aligns with what you would want to give towards, like that is an acceptable and very welcomed donation, but our children that are served under Seacoast Youth Services are always affected by the other community organizations that deserve your funding as well.
Gilles, I'm just curious, how much are you funded by donations versus anything else?
It's all donations. I like to say we can't take money from the government because we sue the government. And so it's really grants and donations, and that's what operates us.
And is it a pretty lean operation? Are you guys doing all right?
It's always lean. You have to be lean, right? Every day we have to think about how do we take that $1 of donor money and create the maximum amount of impact from that dollar. That is the calculus in everything we do, whether it's investing that money in resources at the legislature or in an organizing campaign or a lawsuit. That has to be the driving force. And that is something that I know we all take incredibly seriously because it is a limited amount, not only that our organization gets, but just out there in the giving space. And so I know we all take that incredibly seriously.
But you have to pick and choose, though.
Absolutely.
Because you don't have enough lawyers
absolutely. And I think we're lean and mean, but there are always things that we can't do that we would do if we had more resources. Right now in the immigration space in particular, I think we could probably invest more if we had that capacity. I want to explain why I just said that. Right now we're in an environment, particularly in the immigration space, where everyone is being detained. Everyone. Doesn't matter if you've committed a crime, doesn't matter if you're a flight risk, everyone is being detained. You have people in jail. I'm talking about like how do we save money? Maybe we shouldn't detain people that don't need to be detained. We would actually save a huge amount of money doing that. But that means that there's just a lot of work to be done and capacity needs to be built to do that work.
Thank you. Lisa, how about you in terms of funding and what it could do for your organization?
It could expand our impact. The work we do is incredibly intensive. We've worked with one child, for example, for almost 4 years, victim of abuse and neglect, who DCYF moved in the course of that time more than 14 times to 14 different placements, including dumping this child twice in emergency hospital departments without medical necessity. So we do litigation around each of the placements that this child is moved to. So funding increases our capacity to represent more children. The beauty of doing interdisciplinary work, so for a lawyer to have the expertise to represent a client across systems, across types of law, is for us in the child welfare system, we really learn where the failures are and we translate that into policy advocacy. We'd like to do a lot more policy advocacy as well because these statutes, child welfare statutes, are so ripe for reform. I think everybody on this stage deserves funding. The direct services work, the impact litigation is all incredibly demanding. I want to give a shout out to Black Lives Matter. Tanisha Johnson, co-founder, is in the audience. They do great work with kids, and Black and brown children are disproportionately impacted by child welfare systems, youth incarcerative systems, and they do a great job at that too.
So aside from funding, I think people also want to know, what can we do? What else can we do that can make a difference?
One thing that we should never overlook is the importance of really showing up. On our podcast, we had a really sweet father-daughter duo, and the father recounted a time when he held his little girl on his shoulders. And I believe it was last year, at last year's Portsmouth Pride. Oh, I'm going to get choked up. This story always makes me cry. I'm sorry. And he said, look how many people are here supporting you. Look how many people have shown up because they care, they want you to be safe, and they're just happy you exist. And for those of us who don't identify as queer, don't have queer kids, but who want to support youth, who want to, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm like, I don't really know how I can help the ACLU. I can donate, I can come and attend litigation proceedings, I can do advocacy, volunteer work, and I can show up and be a body in the room and a name on a list and show that I'm a real person who knows about these issues, who cares about these issues, and the pushback is very real on that. So please never think that just because you don't have a huge amount of money or you don't have quote-unquote skin in this game by being a member of a community that is being attacked, that you do not have significant influence, because you absolutely do.
Can I just add to that? I know in this climate sometimes you can feel hopeless. There is so much power in this room. Like, you are all doing it right now. And I want to just savor the wins. Like, wins are happening. They're happening. I'll just give you an example. The governor vetoed a law, or a proposed bill this past summer that would have made much easier for communities to enact book bans. And why was that done? Because there was pressure applied that this is wrong for our state. That happens through community, through all of the letters to the editor that were written, all of the postcards that were written. That's a win, and that's power, and that's a way individuals just several months ago were able to make substantial change in the state of New Hampshire, because had that passed, we know what we would have seen in so many communities were efforts to ban books like Stamped and Genderqueer. We in New Hampshire in 2018 passed protections for trans folks with respect to housing, employment, public accommodations. We did that in 2018. And that was done in an environment where a lot of folks thought we wouldn't necessarily pass that, and we did. What I'm just saying that there's always hope for optimism. I'm a hopeful person, and maybe like we all have to be in these roles. But I just think there are wins out there. If we mobilize and we organize, we can find them and we can achieve them. And then you get a win, another win, and now you get a streak. And that's how you make change. So,
I think there's also room for how we raise our children and grandchildren and nieces and nephews, and that it isn't just about acceptance, but it's about belonging. And that feels like a important distinction for kids especially, and youth. I just have a quick story. When our first Pride March, my trans daughter and my gay son were there flying their stuff, and we're waiting in line to start the march, and the police came over and said, we're going to be out, and there's protesters, and we're going to be out there protecting you. And my son Rory was like, what are they protesting? Like, he had no idea that there were people out there that had a problem with him being a effeminate boy that loved to twirl and dance and pink things. And I had created my family and I had created this bubble for him because I felt like that's the way to help him have good self-esteem. But in that moment I was like, wow, we really created a big bubble. But it was thanks to so many people in this room and who are friends and family, and helped me, for them, build their self-esteem. And they're solid people now. They're in college, they are thriving because they have that self-esteem. And yes, They now know that there are people that hate them and that people that don't want them to even exist, but that's a piece that we can all take part in, and how we treat our youth and how we treat kids who are different. And I'm not just talking about LGBTQ kids, but like kids with different learning disabilities and physical disabilities and just kids who are different, to help them feel like they do belong. And I feel like it's more than acceptance. I just wanted to make that point. Did you want to jump in here?
That was beautiful, so I think I forgot the question. I think the one thing that we need to all take away is like the awareness of our own personal bias, our own personal story, not assuming that everyone has grown up like us, not assuming that everyone has the same experiences or even has looked at the same experiences that we have. When I was in schools, and often, like this certainly trickles into my work at SYS, is that we were so ingrained in the trauma-informed education and being a trauma-sensitive school and a trauma-sensitive district. And really, we needed to stop asking ourselves, like, what's wrong with this kid? And what happened? What happened to this child? We often see the outward behavior, the defiance, the delinquency, the risky behavior, and we're not seeing where that all stems from. We're not seeing what the root cause is. We're not looking at the systems that created an issue for the family generations ago. So every time you have that initial, oh my God, what's wrong with that kid? Pause, because there is a deeper story for all of us. And sometimes it's a heartbreaking story, right? And sometimes it starts in the hospital when you didn't go home with your parents, right? We've had clinicians in the hospital with a CPSW saying, unfortunately, this child can't go home with their parents. What's the plan for this kid? So 0 days old, right? All the way through adolescence. So I really just urge you to be very aware and very compassionate and understand that there's always so much more to everyone's story.
We just have a few minutes left here. Let's end on a positive note of maybe a success story or an example of an intervention that was successful, or a kid that's thriving. Or Lisa, you want to jump in?
Sure. We've had success around getting kids home from institutional placement sooner than it would have taken otherwise. So one of the challenges with institutional placement is there's no end date. And so kids are told, I don't know, maybe you get out in a couple months, but maybe it's years. Kids age out. They turn 18 in these facilities. So we've had success harnessing the social science, the literature on ACEs, on bad outcomes in institutional placement, and educating system actors around those things and getting children moved back to their communities. We've had success advocating for kids, working with school districts to keep kids in school, kids with special education needs in school. It's really hard for kids who have been system involved, who have suffered trauma. They fall behind in school. They're often, because of the emotional and behavioral dysregulation, they're counterproductively suspended, and so they fall even further behind. And then they get to a certain age in high school where they say, I'm not going. And school refusal becomes a really big issue. So we've had success collaborating with school districts to come up with flexible schedules to send kids to alternative programs where they can collect credits. We've also had success at the state legislature. We were one of a handful of nonprofits. An alarm went off, and I don't know if it was me, that succeeded finally in getting the right to a lawyer for victims of abuse and neglect who the state sends to institutions or at risk of institutions. Huge success. That becomes effective in January of 2026. We're working now on getting the state to change its harmful policy of co-opting foster children's Social Security benefits. If they have a parent who has paid into the Social Security system but died, they're entitled to survivor benefits. New Hampshire takes that money and uses it to pay for things like institutional placement. Other children in foster care who don't have those benefits don't have to pay their way for services that provide bad outcomes for them. That money can be used for unmet needs and to be reserved for when the child turns 18, so they could maybe not be homeless and have a place to live. Those are some successes we've had, and we're working towards success on that other reform.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to jump in with
I really want to make sure everyone has an opportunity here. I think some of the things that we're really proud of in our organization is just purely on the legal side, though there's been a lot of legislative wins as well, even in a tough environment on some of our issues. We've been lucky and fortunate enough to be able to file 25 cases in the past 9 months alone on a host of issues. Obviously a lot on the immigration space, and certainly a lot in the education equity case. And I want to just say, like, we're winning most of them. Like, judges are paying attention on a lot of these issues. They read the newspaper like all of us, right, and are seeing some of these things. So I think even when the climate seems like it's a challenge, I think litigation continues to be a viable way to make change. And I want to get back to a point I made before about detaining everyone. And I'm not being hyperbolic, that's really happening. I also want to flag, when you get people out, their outcomes fundamentally change with respect to their ability to defend themselves and remain in the country and be with their kids. We all know what happens when parents aren't with their kids, right? All of these things are connected. We just most recently represented a person. He was 21. He looks like he was 14, and that's what the judge said, not me. He brought in, he was being detained, done nothing wrong, received special immigrant juvenile status, and then had that status ripped away, and he was subject to mandatory detention. And we got him out. But we're really proud of that, but I think it's a highlight of just, there's so many people like him that need help.
Did you have something you wanted to share?
Yeah, I am new to my role and to New Hampshire Outright, but up until last year, we were Seacoast Outright. And for 31 years, Seacoast Outright operated in Portsmouth. But in this past year, we have expanded our direct services. Outside of Portsmouth, we now offer peer support groups for children. We have our little Outriders, starting kindergarten, all the way through our teenagers and our young adult group up to people aged 24. Not just in Portsmouth, but we have opened weekly groups in Manchester, in Nashua, and Laconia. And this is because, referring to that statistic, one supportive adult decreases the risk of suicide for queer youth by 50%. It cuts it in half. In New Hampshire, we are a tiny state, but we are a hard-to-get-around state. And so if they can't get to us, we go to them. And so we have had wonderful success in expanding our programming across the state. And our goal, our long-term goal, is to have no child farther than 45 minutes from a in-person peer-to-peer space, so that regardless of what is happening, including being ripped away from their family, having their parents removed from them, being in the foster care service, that they can get to our programming. A lot of our children do not communicate with the adults in their lives that they're coming to our programming for their own personal safety. So being able to be as accessible to them as possible is really vital, that they can access our resources. So I think that's a huge win.
Yeah, it is. So we are going to wrap up, but everyone is welcome to stay for another half an hour. We don't have to be out of here till 9, and it's a social group, and the bar is still open, and there's still food. So please continue. Our guests are going to be here to answer questions. We are accepting donations, and the QR code is in the program. It would be amazing to reach this goal. It's a lot of money, but you can just even from this group, you can see what an amazing impact it would have in our community. The impact survey is coming in your email box, and we welcome you to sign up for one of the cohort groups to continue tonight's discussion. And for anybody that hasn't been involved in the Seacoast Women's Giving Circle, again, it's open to all women, and there is no minimum donation. And so it's a wonderful way to learn and make an impact on your community. So I was honored to be here tonight. Thank you all so much. We've learned so much. And thank you all very much for joining us and being here, and have a great rest of the night.